Hi guys, I'm Charlotte and it's been a while, I know, but I wanted to do another little vlog review discussion type thing for the Gospel of Loki by Joanne M. I'm not making videos consistently, so this is like a one-off. Please don't get used to me being like back or anything, but I really do want to keep up doing these little kind of vloggy discussion things for the mythtake reads books. So this was one of them. It was the book for September and October. Our theme was Norse mythology, and I'm very late with this. I was very late reading the book. I have already read it and it was a reread for me, and I thought I would enjoy it more this time around, but that's kind of what I want to discuss right now. Again, it's late, I know, but better late than never. I am currently reading my Slavic book. Slavic folklore is the theme for November and December. Did I say that this Norse one was for October to November because that was September to October? I'm confused. I am kind of bogged down by uni work at the minute, but I'm sort of in a limbo with all my assessments, hence why I'm filming this. But like I said, please don't get used to it. But this is just to go over my thoughts on it. I have my review here from the first time I read it, hence why I keep looking this way. And I just thought I will go through my review paragraph by paragraph. I'll put it on the screen here and try and just break down my thoughts and stuff. I don't have the book with me physically here at uni. I took it home when I finished it to make room for more stuff here. So yeah, let's just jump right into my review and if my thoughts have changed. Okay, so I opened with, the Gospel of Loki was an interesting take on the Norse myths. I only had a very basic knowledge of the gods and goddesses and their stories, a lot of which came from the Marvel films and comics, so I didn't really know what to expect, other than I probably wouldn't end up reading information that conflicted with what I already knew. Now, at this point, I think it's safe to say I know more about Norse mythology and the gods and their stories, etc. I have a Norse mythology inspired tattoo sleeve on my leg going on, so I kind of know my stuff. So this time it wasn't just a basic introduction. I do think though, as a whole, the book is a sort of basic one. So if you don't know much about them but kind of want to dip your toe into it, this would be a good place to start. It does focus more on Loki, obviously the Gospel of Loki, and his take on things, but it does cover some of the basic myths, such as the walls being built around Asgard, Otter's ransom. What else does it cover? Thrym and everything that he's involved with. The journey to Utgard, where Thor and Loki have to do like trials, kind of similar, I guess, in a way to Hercules' 12 trials, the 12 labours of Hercules. They're similar to that, where they wrestle old age, try and out-eat wildfire, things like that. It mentions briefly oracles such as Mimir's head and his prophecy of Ragnarok, Golvig hide. What else did it do? Idun and her apples, it does that. It covers Loki going to the dwarves to get Thor's hammer, Freya's necklace, Odin's spear, etc. So yeah, it does have some of the basic, more commonly known myths in there, but they are told from like Loki's perspective and how he was directly involved in them. So yeah, if you don't know much, it shouldn't conflict with what you already know. And if, like me, at the first time reading this, you only knew what the Marvel comics and films had based it off, it won't conflict with that either. However, I will say now I know more. The MCU has a very loose tie to Norse mythology, so just be aware of that. In the MCU, it has like Loki and Thor as adopted brothers, but in the actual myths, it's Loki and Odin who are blood brothers. So yeah, be aware of that. That is a big thing that might conflict, but yeah, this is based more on like the real stuff. The MCU is more fantastic and fictionalized and is not the best representation of the Norse myths. Okay, so next paragraph I say, while I did enjoy the tone of Loki's narration, I was not a fan of the way he and the other gods spoke and the words they used. Yeah, that is still very much the case. The writing style in this is quite weird, and I know that we mentioned this in like the mythtake chats and stuff. Ashley in particular had a problem with it. The writing is just strange. I felt that it came across as very modern and similar to the way we speak now. I understand it was Loki's retelling of things that had happened in the past, but the modern feel to things threw me off a bit, and I felt it took away a certain authenticity to what the characters had to say because, chances are, God, my sentence is long. because chances are they wouldn't have spoken like that at the time the events first happened. I think I would have preferred it to read more like a historical fiction, but that's just personal preference. That still stands. The interjection of modern terminology and just the kind of way we speak now felt very jarring, because you're reading about essentially Viking culture and Viking environments, and obviously they didn't have things like the internet and phones and the same slang and terminology that we have now. So in one breath, when they're talking about like drinking horns and they have, you know, the whole Viking aesthetic of that, and then Loki's saying stuff like, oh my god, wow, that's like legit. Not an exact quote, of course, but things like that, it just doesn't mesh well, and that kind of pulled me out of it and made me want to read it less. It's also just the fact that Loki is constantly referring to himself as like your humble narrator, yours truly, and it's just kind of cheesy, and I know it fits his personality in this book and just kind of how everyone else writes his personality, but I really don't like it. I have come to the conclusion that I don't like Loki in modern retellings and settings because everybody writes him the same and I just can't stand it. The same goes for Thor. They are caricatures at this point, and part of me finds that a little bit disrespectful, because at the end of the day, this did used to be a religion. This used to be what people believed in, and they would pray to these people and these gods. So now to kind of make it that, oh, Loki's the sneaky one that everybody hates, and teehee, he's a troublemaker, and Thor's the stupid one who's really strong, that to me is like a little bit offensive. And I know you can like inject satire and stuff into it, and I don't know whether like Vikings and old Nordic people would have felt the same way and wanted to put some humour into their religion, but I don't know, the mythology is kind of like an iffy one. So when I see people mocking it to that extent almost, I don't know how to feel with it, because even though I myself am not religious and not spiritual in any way, seeing this, it doesn't sit right with me. It's like if I went into a church and started singing hymns, like that makes me feel uncomfortable, because it's not something I believe in, but other people really do. And for me to kind of do it anyway when I'm sat there going, oh well, it's not real, I don't know, it just, my personal morals and opinions, it doesn't sit well with that. But yeah, just the writing style in general, I wasn't a fan of at all. I think I could stomach it more the first time, because like I didn't know what it was going to be like and going into it fresh. But now I knew it was going to be like that, and I had kind of forgotten that I don't like that style. I do feel that it had to be written in first person for the way that the story was being told. I don't think third person would have been as effective, because it is Loki's story, so doing that in third person might not have worked as well. But I just think it could have been done in a more sophisticated manner, I think. And you can still be satirical and funny while having that like elevated language a little bit. Yeah, I don't really know specifics and like theory or anything to do with writing or linguistics, so I'm just going to move on from that point. But yeah, the writing was like the biggest problem I had. And that's what my next paragraph in my review is. The writing is another thing that I take issue with. While it was simple, I did find it a bit choppy in places, and there are a few times when I had to reread sentences to fully understand them or get my head around word choice and structure. This I didn't have as much issue with this time, because like I've already read it and I do have more knowledge of the myth, so I think my increased knowledge helped with that, so it didn't come across as choppy. And word choices, I guess I understood more because like I knew the story, so I could kind of I knew the feel and the theme and the tone of them, so the word choices didn't seem as odd. Some of the dialogue felt a bit forced, but perhaps that was due to the nature of the storytelling and not the dialogue itself. This, I think, it's not as clear in my written review, but I think because it was Loki retelling things from his point of view, obviously when we retell dialogue, we kind of change it up a little bit. We don't remember exactly what was said, we emphasize different points, and our own personal opinions and feelings can like taint it in a way. So I do feel like some of the dialogue, for instance, if it was coming from Heimdall or Balder, two characters that Loki really disliked and there was a lot of animosity between them, obviously if he was reporting what they were saying, he would play it to make them sound stupid. Does that make sense? Was that a coherent thought? Basically, Loki relaying other people's dialogue, he's going to make people he doesn't like look less favourable. If it was third person and it was those people saying it as they were saying it, I think it would have been less choppy and less forced, because it would have been organic from those people and it wouldn't have had Loki's spin on it. Then I say the inside cover of this book clearly states that it's an adult epic fantasy novel, but I personally found it to have little difference to a young adult novel. I feel that the adult part is more meant in the way of content, as there are a few brief mentions of sex and other adult topics, but nothing I thought a mature reader couldn't handle. Yeah, I still do feel like that. It doesn't, it's like I said, you could do it in a more sophisticated way. It just feels a bit rough around the edges and not like a real adult book. I don't really want to get into the debate of like young adult and adult and stuff, but I don't know how to explain it. I'm awful at describing things anyway, and I'm rusty doing videos, so bear with me. But I just feel like it was a bit simple. When I think of like an adult book, I think of something that's got maybe a bit more complex vocabulary, or the writing style is that little bit more complex, or again the themes are more unsuitable for younger people. But this didn't feel like that. This just felt basic and simple and just not great. Like, overall I gave it 3 stars, so I did enjoy it, but that was the same rating I gave it the first time I read it, so clearly I haven't enjoyed it more, and I still have pretty much all the same problems with it. And just the writing and the style of it is the big one. It did feel kind of young adult, but then it's throwing in slightly more adult things like the sex that I mentioned, and then there's like brief mentions of what is essentially bestiality, etc., because Loki fathers a horse, as he is a horse, but you know, there's jokes and things that it's just like, oh wow, he had sex with a horse, you know. So in that sense it is more mature, but I don't think it's something, it doesn't feel like an adult book. I felt like a mature teenager because I read this and been fine with it. I know when I first read it I was like a mature teenager. So yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's the tone of it, mostly the tone of it. It didn't feel like a serious book that you would see like, I don't know, a 50-year-old reading, if that makes sense. You know, there are certain books and writers that you kind of assign to age groups, and this one, just as a whole with the writing, feels a bit amateurish. I think that's a good word for it. It feels a little bit amateur, a bit young, simple, and just, I don't know, it just doesn't feel serious, which I think is a good way to sum it up, because I've just done a really bad job of summing it up, so good one, Charlotte. And my penultimate paragraph is, that being said, the concept of seeing things through Loki's eyes was very interesting. I often found myself feeling sorry for him and hating the other gods, but I do feel this was more because of how they were developed, or rather how they weren't. But then I feel because the book is from Loki's perspective, we would only get to see their bad points anyway. So good job to the author for making me like her narrator. This time around, I didn't like the narrator. As I previously mentioned, it just didn't feel right. I didn't get on with it. But the first time I read this, I think I was more tolerant of it because I didn't know as much about Norse mythology and stuff. Now I have a bit more understanding. I'm kind of like, this trope of Loki being presented like this is a bit overdone and cliche. I do think though that she managed to get across the attitude towards the other gods, but as I said, because it's from Loki's perspective, we would only see their bad points anyway. So I do think she got Loki's viewpoint across, and I really did like feel that. So when he's complaining about Heimdall and Balder, etc., I'm sat there going, oh yeah, they're horrible, aren't they? They're awful. That's because he's feeling that way, so it's been like projected onto me to feel that way. But yeah, the big thing for me is I'm just not a huge fan of Loki in contemporary modern fiction, because he's presented like this and I don't like this. He's not my favourite god. I love him in the MCU, but that's purely down to Tom Hiddleston's performance of him, and because he's got that kind of whiny, bratty, stuck-up, snobby thing going on. He doesn't have this kind of jokester clown thing going on that I just don't like. I really don't like it. But yeah, he's not my favourite god. Odin is like hands down my favourite god, and I do have to like commend Harris for her portrayal of Odin. I really like her Odin. I liked him in Bookmarks, and even though he's not the central character in this, I really enjoyed it again. He just has this kind of aura of power and mystery, and even though I have only read the first Lord of the Rings book, I kind of will parallel him to Gandalf, which I think if I have a bit of Tolkien knowledge, that's what Tolkien was going for. I think he was trying to go for Gandalf being this kind of Odin god figure. And I see that in this. I really liked the character of Odin in this. There's just something about him. He was written well. Even though we're seeing it from Loki's perspective, it was written nicely. Every time he was mentioned, and it's mentioned that his colours are glowing, and I don't know, I really enjoyed it, and it's difficult to explain. But yeah, I liked the other gods more than I liked Loki. I didn't like Loki's characterization, but I enjoyed everybody else's. And whether that is just because I know more now or what, I don't know. I just liked everyone other than the narrator, because the narrator came down to the writing style more than anything, and I didn't like the writing style, therefore I couldn't get on board with the narrator. And then there is just the fact that Loki in this sense is overdone, and I would like to see more from that. I would like to see more from other gods. I would like to see more that is not just Ragnarok. I just feel like a lot of this is overdone and cliche, and that's like, the writing's my main problem, and then that would be my second problem. It's just I just want more from Norse mythology. There isn't as much out there for it as there is like Greek. Like, Greek has conquered the market. Norse is getting there, I think, but it's a little harder to find. And then everything I have found personally has been centered on either Loki or Ragnarok, or both, and I don't care. Like, I don't just want another retelling of all the myths. I've got about 3 or 4 of those on my shelves now. I want more. I want stuff that's featured. I want stuff that focuses on Thor. I want stuff that focuses on Balder. I want stuff that focuses on Hel. I want stuff about Odin. I want more from authors who are writing about Norse myth. But my final thing to wrap it up was just, overall, despite the few things that did bug me, I enjoyed this book. It was an interesting, easy introduction to Norse mythology, and it definitely piqued my interest in the subject. And that still stands. I do think it is a nice little introduction. It's a very short book. It's about 300 pages. It covers, like I said, some of the most classic, well-known myths, and it's just a nice book to read if you haven't read much about the topic before. I would say take it with a pinch of salt, because obviously Loki fits into this trope that I mentioned I don't like. But if you know nothing about the stories and you don't want to just sit and read like a book of short stories, then this is a good place to start. It definitely still has like piqued my interest. As I just said, I want to see more of these different things. I don't just want to see more Loki and Ragnarok. So I definitely still have my interest peak, and I did like it. As big as the issues I had with it were, I did like it because I like Norse myths. I like reading these stories. I like seeing Odin on the page. And when I did sit down to read it, it took me ages. I'm disappointed in myself because it's a 300-page book and I could have easily read that in 3 days, but I just wasn't reading. What was I trying to say just then? I've completely lost my point. Overall, I think I was trying to say that I did enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it more the second time round like I thought I would. I really did think I would enjoy this more when I reread it, but I didn't. And that is because of the writing. I will still be reading the sequel, and hopefully I enjoy that a bit more because it's something fresh, and even though I'm assuming the writing will be the same, it will have different stories, so I'm excited to see that. It has kind of made me want to read Bookmarks again and give that a second chance, because I read that over, not last summer, the summer before, I read that and it took me ages to read that. It's quite a long book and it took me ages to read it anyway, and because it took me so long I stopped enjoying it as much. But I think if I reread that faster I would enjoy it, and that one's written very differently. Even though it is by the same author and in the same series, it's written completely differently. So yeah, I would like to reread that. I would like to read the sequel to that, Runelight. But for now, those are my thoughts on the mythtake pick for Norse mythology for September and October. So if you read this book or the sequel or any other Norse mythology book, please let me know. I will maybe get back to you. I'm not making any promises. I'm not back on YouTube. I just want to keep up with mythtake stuff. So there will be a Slavic vlog discussion thing like this eventually, because I'm listening to Uprooted by Naomi Novik, and I'm not enjoying that. I'm not having much luck with the mythtake at the minute, just between uni taking up more time and being exhausted from that, and then not enjoying the books as much as I thought. But yeah, there will be more mythtake content from me in the future, but yeah, not a lot else. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this and enjoyed seeing my thoughts on a book that I have reread. Feel free to leave a comment or talk to me on Twitter. Twitter will probably be better because I'm more active on there. My Twitter handle is @sharkart_. I will leave a link down below. So yeah, just that's it, I think. Bye.